We talk about the LA Kings roster, expectations for the upcoming season, and more with Russell Morgan from Hockey Royalty on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love you to leave us a positive comment on Apple Podcasts if you like the show. And we're on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, 20 plus years at the Fox Sports Radio Network. I'm also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the last 18 years. And a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Also brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's FanDuel.com to get started. Well, as I'm sure you know, the countdown to the NHL season is still on for the LA Kings. Their season opener is October 10th in Buffalo against the Sabres, just 2 days away. Kings home opener, October 24th against the San Jose Sharks, 16 days away. The Kings have finalized their 23-man roster, and we're going to talk about that and more with friend of the show, Russell Morgan from Hockey Royalty. And there he is right there. He's here to talk about the Kings. You need to follow him on X or Twitter. He is at NHL Russell, and of course, he is a podcast host as well. Check out Hockey Royalty stuff. Hey, Russell, how are you? Fresh off the golf course, I hear.
Yeah, that's right. I had a nice little day out there in Talega Golf Course down in San Clemente. Beautiful day outside. Driver was looking good today. Short game was a little rough, but nice to get back out there. How you doing, Eddie?
I'm doing good. Get that golf in now because I know you're going to be very busy once the NHL season starts, which it has for some teams. As we are recording this, the Seattle Kraken for some reason are playing a hockey game right now. I don't know why. That's very bizarre, but good for them. And we've got other hockey action coming up today, and then the Kings obviously getting going here very, very soon. And we're definitely going to get into what's going on with the LA Kings. But we have some news today to talk about, and some big news as longtime Hall of Fame voice of the Kings, Nick Nixon, announced that this season is going to be his last. The Kings released a statement from Nick regarding this, which I am going to read right now. He said, quote, "There comes a moment when you get a sense that it is the right time to move on, and I feel that after this season, it will be that time. Shortly after graduating from college in 1975, I began my hockey broadcasting career, and it has been an absolute privilege to bring the game to the listeners and viewers from one season to the next. Through it all, I have enjoyed calling every shot, every save, every goal, and 2 Stanley Cups. To my family and the Kings organization, thank you for your unwavering support and loyalty. To the great fans of Kings hockey, thank you for your encouragement and kind words over the years. It has meant the world to me." From Nick Nixon. And he was on this show right before the start of last season, and he revealed to me, and I didn't really ask him the question, but he said, "I've got a couple more years left in me before I call it quits." And then when I saw it come out on social media today, I said, well, he literally meant a couple of years, last year and now this year. So 44 seasons as the voice of the Kings. This will be his 44th season and his final season. Awesome guy. I'm really happy because Nick was kind of in the shadow of Bob Miller for a long, long time. I'm really happy he got his chance to kind of be out in front, be the voice of the Kings on both television and radio as well, continuing that, which he did for many, many years at a high level. He's in the Hockey Hall of Fame, but kind of sad. This is his last year. Well-deserved. Obviously, he's been a huge part of Kings hockey for a long, long time. But yeah, Nick Nixon, this is the final season. Hopefully it'll be a memorable one for him. Any thoughts on that announcement, and any memories of Nick Nixon you might want to share?
Oh, man, so many. I mean, Nick Nixon and the LA Kings, it just felt like just always connected. I mean, he was synonymous with everything as far as hockey in Southern California. I mean, I feel like we've been so blessed as Kings fans to kind of grow up listening and watching or hearing from Bob Miller, Jim Fox, and then you have Nick Nixon and Darrell Evans on the radio. I mean, I've gotten to meet Nick Nixon a few times since I started covering the team, and like you kind of just meet your stars, and sometimes you kind of get a little overwhelmed when you come across him. But I mean, he couldn't be a nicer guy, and just to be able to get to know him and get a chance to talk to him, I felt so blessed. But even just as Kings fans, getting the chance to hear him give us the stories of the game over these last 44 years is incredible. I mean, I'm 36, so I've been listening to him my entire life ever since I'm a Kings fan. So yeah, it's going to be sad to see him go.
Yeah, and I don't know if you know about this, but I played this for Nick. It was a little bit nerdy, but I don't care. My ringtone and my text tone are the two final calls of Nick
Oh, nice.
Nixon winning the Stanley Cup. I'm going to play one of them, the first one, and off my phone here. So this is what when anyone calls me, this is what I hear.
The long wait is over. After 45 years, the Kings can wear their crown. The Los Angeles Kings have won the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, that never gets old. Even if I get spam calls or whatever, I don't mind because I literally have never tired of hearing that. There have been a few awkward times where maybe I had it in my pocket and suddenly Nick Nixon is yelling and I'm in the grocery store and people are like, "What the hell is that?" But yeah, I don't care. It was a great call, and certainly you could hear the genuine emotion of a guy who had called so many Kings games, and we know as Kings fans, depending on how long you've been a Kings fan, there were times we probably really thought, would we ever see a Stanley Cup? Because they've had a lot of tough times. There was those 2 and 3 years, and that kind of has really helped smooth over a lot of really tough times. But I think Nick and Bob and Jim probably really were wondering, are we ever going to see this? And when they did see it, and like a lot of fans, I think they were just overcome with emotion that it finally happened. And I think they were genuinely really happy for Kings fans because they know, right? They knew what we went through, and they were really happy for us. And I was happy for them too, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, I still get chills just hearing that. I mean, it was nice because even when Bob retired, to think about that aspect that they got the chance to. I mean, they're part of the team. They've been around years, longer than players, and even probably one of the more tenured employees of the team. So they've gone through more ups and downs than a lot of other people. So for them to finally get that Stanley Cup call or that Stanley Cup rings, and I mean, I still remember the moment when there's video of Jim Fox like bawling his eyes out as the clock's ticking down to 0. So you can only imagine what that meant to Nick Nixon, Bob Miller, and all of them. But yeah, to see the voices now start to change, I guess, going forward, it's sad for sure, but a lot of good memories to be had.
Yeah, I got very lucky. I actually got to stand behind Nick Nixon when he made that call.
Oh wow.
And he you couldn't see him, but he was shaking his fist. Yeah, I got to host Kings Talk that night because Nick and Daryl wanted to go to celebrate. And it was the easiest job I ever had. It was just people talking about how happy they were. Actually, a show where no one complained.
No complaints.
And no one asked about next year or trades or anything else. It was all just, oh, I can't believe it. I'm so happy. It was a great thing to do. So we will miss you, Nick Nixon, and I am going to try and get him on the show at some point and talk to him about it. But yeah, we Nick Nixon, like I said, I think Kings fans everywhere just appreciate all the hard work he gave us, and we're happy to have one final season with him, and hopefully, like I said, hopefully it'll be a memorable season. You never know. There was another note, just real quick to pass along. I did see Josh Schaefer, who is the play-by-play voice of the Ontario Reign, is getting to be a part of the Kings radio broadcast, not doing play-by-play, but being a part of the post-game, in between periods, pre-game, that type of thing. Not sure if he's being groomed to maybe take over the job down the road, but we shall see about that. Obviously, Russell, we want to get your thoughts on what's going on with the LA Kings. Let me ask you real quick before we kind of take a break here. The Kings have finalized their opening night roster for the most part, right? The Andre Lee thing, we think he's on the roster, but he's been loaned to Ontario. But right now, we do have 12 forwards, 8 defensemen, and 2 goalies. And there's the anticipation that Drew Doughty, Arthur Calle are going to be placed on long-term injured reserve. Just your thoughts on, I guess, keeping 8 defensemen. Do you think that's a direct result of the injury to Drew Doughty, or no?
I don't think so. I think the plan was to always keep 8 defensemen even before Doughty's injury. And I don't know if that's just more or less about being cautious with Brant Clark coming into the lineup, because now it's going to be what we all expect to be a first full NHL season for him. Maybe if they're back to backs, or maybe he kind of struggled a little bit, you have the extra defenseman. But even you have to think about just the beginning part of the year. You're playing 7 games on the road, and they're all East Coast trips, or most of them East Coast. I think you got the 2 games in Vegas and Anaheim. But I mean, to carry 8 defensemen on those trips, you have a back to back, I believe, in one of those first 5 games. It makes a little bit of sense. So in case there's any injuries or players are struggling or whatnot, having an extra defenseman as well, whether it be Andreas Englund or Caleb Jones, as far as the extras, having them alongside isn't the worst thing.
All right, we are going to talk about the Kings' projected lineup and what you saw, Russell, this preseason with the Kings. Get your comments on that next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And of course, FanDuel is there for you to bet on Major League Baseball's postseason. The Dodgers and Padres are even at a game apiece going into Game 3 of that NLDS. Dodgers are getting a run and a half in the Game 3 coming up tonight. Over-under is 8 runs. I take the over on that one. Dodgers are a plus 420 to win it all. So if you want to place a bet on the Dodgers, you certainly can do that. Go to FanDuel, browse the latest betting odds of your favorite sports and teams on the Sportsbook app, and get in on the action. And of course, you could bet on the LA Kings at all. They are plus 2,300 to win the Stanley Cup. You get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That is FanDuel.com. All right, we have got more with Russell Morgan. He is from Hockey Royalty. And Russell, wanted to get your thoughts on the preseason for the LA Kings. 4-1-1 for what that's worth. I don't know if the records are that big of a deal, but it is, their first group of games under new full-time head coach Jim Hiller, who, of course, was incorporating some new things. I guess I'll ask you this. As far as the preseason goes, anything that was noticeable to you different about this LA Kings group as opposed to past seasons with Todd McClellan?
The switch from the 1-3-1 to the 1-2-2, it certainly seems like they're adopting this more aggressive approach, more notably in the neutral zone, which is great. I mean, if you're a Kings fan, because we've been living in this time of passivity with Todd McClellan and playing the 1-3-1, that it's almost become a running joke across the National Hockey League about the Kings play. So now that they're adopting this more aggressive approach, I love it. And I feel like it's going to open up a lot more opportunity for players like Quentin Byfield, Adrian Kempe, Kevin Fiala, all these players that can skate so well. Now they have the chance to do that and do what they do best. So I'm excited. I think we saw a little bit of glimpses of that throughout the preseason. So as far as like the biggest change, I would feel like that's one. Special teams still a little bit to work with. I know you lose a player like Drew Doughty, who's always been a stalwart on the -- 1 power play unit, and replace him in a young player with like Brant Clark. That transition isn't going to be so smooth. So there's going to be a little bit of time to work with that. But I love what I'm seeing out of the penalty kill too. It's kind of the same approach that they have in this neutral zone 5-on-5 play that they're adopting in the penalty kill too. So if they play aggressive in that situation, I think that can open up to a lot more offensive chances in the penalty kill and on 5-on-5 too.
Yeah, we even saw some pretty nice shorthanded chances from the Kings this preseason as well on the penalty kill. I want to ask you about Quentin Byfield. I mentioned the other day, and after seeing that the assist he had in the final preseason game against Florida, where he kind of skates through defenders and then just blindly backhands a pass to a wide open Trevor Moore. And I think it's not just, I hope this works out. I really think he can process things real time very quickly and kind of be cool with the puck. We saw that highlight goal he had against Columbus where, he doesn't have it cleanly, but he still makes it work. He has shown glimpses of being a guy who at top speed, with players around him still being able to make plays. And I don't know. I mean, I'm excited when I see Adrian Kempe skating down the ice, but I don't know that I've been as excited in a while. Seeing a player like Quentin Byfield picking up speed with the puck and just excited to see what he's going to do.
I mean, I can't say enough good things about Byfield. I feel like my expectations for him go up and up every time I watch him play. I mean, I go back to the first day of training camp where you kind of just I mean, they were going to have this scrimmage, and you kind of just expected them to go out there and maybe play a little bit of pond hockey where they're out there, maybe just getting used to the new system and their new line mates and whatnot. But Quentin Byfield, man, like he was out there trying to like make a statement. I mean, one of the plays I remember vividly was Riley Walsh, poor guy, had the puck in the corner boards, turned around, and all of a sudden Quentin Byfield just buried him in the corner. And it was almost kind of like an eye opener, not necessarily probably to the rest of the team, but even to maybe himself saying like, okay, I'm out here on the ice and I'm going to be one of the best players in this team, not a player who's just part of the team now expected to produce. And I think that's that change that we're starting to see and what we've seen in the preseason now. It's a different Quentin Byfield in terms of his mindset. He's going out there expecting to be the best player on the ice every time he steps foot out there. And we've seen in his play. I mean, that play that you mentioned, that assist to Moore against Florida, I don't know if he makes that kind of play last year or even the year before that. Like he put that in the middle, back in the slot, because he knew probably somebody was going to be there. And it's that confidence level that's been taken up a notch. Yeah, like I try not to elevate my expectations so wildly with him as far as him being like a point per game player or whatever. But yeah, like I watch him play and I'm like, this is going to be a season where we're going to see a different Quentin Byfield.
Any of the newer or younger players this preseason that stood out to you that you're excited about this year?
You know, one player I'm actually kind of piqued my interest a little bit is Kyle Burrows. And I think a little bit has to do with, probably a lot of it has to do with Drew Doughty's injury and where he's going to be playing. I mean, with Doughty out, he's expected to start off playing with Vladislav Gavrikov. And to be honest with you, I didn't really know much about Kyle Burrows before they traded Carl Grunstrom for him in San Jose. But you kind of look at some of his numbers, and I've watched him play a little bit. I don't want to make the comparison to Matt Roy, but I can see like a little Matt Roy light kind of type of player in there. You can look at some of his metrics there in San Jose. I mean, that was obviously a terrible San Jose team, but he has some pretty positive relative expected goal share metrics, relative Corsi share metrics compared to those teammates. So that's kind of good. So I'm not like I said, I'm not expecting him to be this like Matt Roy type player where he's gonna go out and just be steady Eddie like Matt Roy was. But I'm curious, and I thought that one moment that he had in the Boston game where Alex Turcotte kind of got a little bit of a run taken at him, and one of the first players jumping on that Boston player was Kyle Burrows. And that seems like that's something that we hadn't seen in the past. And I know Drew Doughty kind of alluded to it as far as not being pushed around a little bit. And when you have players like Kyle Burrows and Tanner Jeannot and Joel Edmondson now in the lineup, I think we might see a little bit more of that, and maybe brings a little bit more camaraderie to the team.
One other younger player that I thought had a very solid preseason was Alex Turcotte. I know Austin Stanovich on our roundtable show that we had talked about, he thinks eventually, I don't know if he thinks it's going to happen, but he would like to see it. He's a little bit more of a fan of maybe seeing Alex Turcotte on that top line with Kopitar and Kempe over Alex Laferriere. Certainly looks like Laferriere is going to get the first shot to be able to hold on to that spot for a while. I kind of like Turcotte more at center, but I understand where he's talking about. I understand the skill he has and that tenacity that he has shown as well. And we always know health is a factor with him, but what did you think about the preseason for Alex Turcotte?
Yeah, I loved everything I've seen with Turcotte. Health has always been the issue, but it certainly seems like it's not an issue now. It wasn't really much of an issue last year, so that's good. But yeah, I kind of agree with you. I like what I've seen from him down the middle. I feel like he can drive play really well, but I do agree with Austin too. Like you don't want to waste a talent like Turcotte. And from everything we've seen, I know it's only been a small sample size. He looks like a player that can produce in the NHL, but I want to see that down the middle. The Kings are their depth down the middle isn't that great right now. But if Turcotte can really assume that role as the 4C for this season, that's huge, especially when you lose a player like Blake Lizotte. So now that we have Turcotte down the middle, maybe who knows? Maybe Deneau leaves after his contract's up or whatever. The Kings need Turcotte, and maybe you need another center that can kind of assume that throne once Anze Kopitar also retires. So you have Byfield who's playing center, looking really good in that position. Now you have Turcotte too, another good young center. I mean, if he can stay in that position and produce there, that's huge for this team and for himself too.
As far as concerns for the Kings going into this regular season, I know you talked about special teams. Is it, I mean, they looked pretty good offensively in the preseason, but that's the preseason. Is it not getting enough scoring? Is it also maybe, the early season going on this road trip, kind of still trying to figure things out on the fly? What's your concern about the start of the season, maybe?
Yeah, I would think just defensively. I mean, you lose a
Mhm.
player like Drew Doughty. Those are hard minutes to replace. I mean, he's playing 25 plus minutes a night, and now we're expecting. I mean, we're all really high on Jordan Spence, and obviously, and what Brant Clark can kind of do as at least offensively. But yeah, when you lose a player like Doughty, that's not an easy replacement. So I think as far as like what I'm concerned about, I would say defense. Um, you also have new players like Joel Edmondson, who's still trying to get his feet wet, playing with a player like Brant Clark. So we'll see how those players adapt to the new positions that they're in, and also the new system that we're playing too.
All right, we're going to talk a little bit more about Brant Clark here in just a second. We'll do that more with Russell Morgan from Hockey Royalty here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Hey, I need to tell you about Indeed. No matter how your last game went, anytime you take the field, you got a shot at greatness. Give your team the best shot at winning by recruiting more MVPs with Indeed, because Indeed is the hiring partner where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. And Indeed's the only job site where you're guaranteed to find quality applications that meet your must-have requirements, or else you don't pay. Indeed partners with you on every step of the hiring process. Find great talent through time-saving tools like Indeed Instant Match, assessments, and virtual interviews. And you only pay for quality applications that meet your must-have requirements. Start hiring right now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/locked on. Go to Indeed.com/locked on to claim your $75 credit. Indeed.com. All right, we are continuing with Russell Morgan from Hockey Royalty. You need to follow him on X and Twitter. He is at NHL Russell, and he's always on top of everything. So I did want to mention, you mentioned Brant Clark. We talked about the Drew Doughty injury. In that Kings Roundtable show that we had, I thought, I was of the opinion that I would like to have seen Brant Clark put on the top pairing. Russell and Carl Balikian, who joined us, this was before we saw Jordan Spence playing on the top pairing before the final two preseason games. They said they put their endorsement behind Jordan Spence. Obviously, it's not a great situation, but what are your thoughts? Do you like the move of Jordan Spence on the top pairing, or did you think maybe it was, let's throw the most talented defenseman we have, there's going to be growing pains, but let's kind of start the learning curve right away with Brant Clark, or is that too much too soon for him?
Yeah, I think it would be a little too much responsibility for him too soon. And this isn't to say that he can't be that player. Obviously, the ceiling is sky high for a player like Brant Clark. But with Jordan Spence, I mean, we've seen him almost play in that role. I mean, just in the last playoffs, I thought he had a really good playoff series going against the Oilers. So I think that's his spot that he's earned over the last few years. Not to say that Brant Clark can earn it himself too. Who knows how the season goes in the early parts. But yeah, Jordan Spence, he's looked really good too in the little spurts the last few games in the preseason games with Mikey Anderson. So I'm excited with that pair. I think those two can kind of mesh pretty well together. And Jordan Spence brings like a little bit more of a dynamic playmaking and at least skating ability than what Drew Doughty brings on the ice. Obviously, I'm not going to sit here and say that he's as good as Drew Doughty is, at least right now. But I'm excited to see what Spence can bring, because that escapability that we see a lot more from Spence using that skating ability is elite, I feel like, in my opinion. So that's a big role for him to assume as that RD1 to start the year, but I think he can live up to it.
I trust Spence defensively, actually. I just wish we'd see a little bit more from him offensively. I still think he's holding back a bit. He's not letting it go. Brant Clark has no trouble letting it go, right? He's not afraid at all to be aggressive, jump up in a play or anything like that. So I hope we can see a little bit more aggressive offensive Jordan Spence going forward.
You know, I totally agree with you, because I feel like there's that skating ability that we see so much in the defensive zone. I feel like we don't see that as much in the offensive zone. Like you're spot on there, because it's like he gets a little too passive and just realizes like, hey, I'm not a forward here. Whereas Brant Clark plays almost like forward. So you almost want to see that a little bit more out of Spence because he can skate so well that it's like, okay, let's add a little bit more risk to your game.
Yeah.
And maybe you don't want to have that too much when you're going up against top talent, as he probably is on the top pair.
Yeah. I mean, I appreciate his defensive responsibility, and I get it, but there's times where I would like to see him take a little bit of a chance and be a little bit more aggressive offensively. Maybe we'll see it. We shall see. As far as the guys that came in from the outside, I said I wasn't real excited about Tanner Jeannot and Warren Fogle and Darcy Kemper. I will say, though, what I saw from him in the preseason was encouraging. I kind of liked it. I understand what the Kings are looking for, and I see that being kind of implemented on the ice. Did you feel encouraged by what you saw from those guys as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Fogle, I've always been high on Warren Fogle
Yeah.
ever since going back to his days in Carolina. I think he's been a great player. Love the addition. Obviously, that line with Fiala and Byfield looks incredible, at least to start and throughout the preseason. So that's great. Tanner Jeannot, I mean, that trade, I wasn't like overly excited about it. Obviously, his days in Tampa Bay weren't as good as that time he had in Nashville with a 20-plus goal season. But yeah, I kind of agree with you. But I think that line playing with Jeannot and Moore, I thought they had some good flashes in the preseason. And we saw Jeannot bring that kind of heavy forechecking ability that we maybe expected out of him a little bit at times throughout the preseason. And it meshes really well with that kind of conehead style that Jeannot and Moore have playing together, where they're just making really short, crisp passes, and it led to a really nice goal. I know it wasn't Moore on the line, but it led to a really nice goal in Anaheim with Tanner Jeannot heavy on the forecheck, taking the body, getting the loose puck over Phil Deneau, and Deneau passed it over to Akil Thomas in the slot. So it led to a really nice goal. So yeah, you were starting to see that what they really, I guess, thought those players would bring. We've seen that on the ice a little bit at parts throughout the preseason. Hopefully they can bring it during the regular season too.
So going into training camp, I had thought the Kings were kind of a bubble team for the playoffs. I wouldn't have been shocked if they'd missed it, but I wouldn't have been shocked if they made it either. After the preseason, I actually feel a little more encouraged that this is a playoff team for a fourth straight season. And I was happy to see that Austin Stanovich and Carl Balikian agreed that they believe the Kings are going to make the playoffs. Do you think we'll see a fourth straight season of Kings playoff hockey?
I do believe so. And I thought that before preseason. In my opinion, I could make the argument that this team is better on paper than they were last year. Obviously, Dubois just didn't work out, and you replace a center like Dubois, who was just awful at times during the season, with a player like Quentin Byfield, who we've seen just glowing plays out of him throughout the preseason. So you replace that 3C with the 3C now. That's a huge improvement. Obviously, you don't really have that top line talent with Alex Laferriere playing with Anze Kopitar and Adrian Kempe, but I really like the depth of this team. I like the top end talent of this team, and I actually really like the goaltending. Darcy Kemper looked really good throughout the preseason too, so that's good to see. So if Kemper can kind of play up to not necessarily that Vezina style that we see, I believe he was nominated at a time or even won a Stanley Cup with Colorado, but if he can just play like almost like what Cam Talbot was, what the Kings got at Cam Talbot last year, I think that's huge. So I had them picked as like a borderline third seed wild card team, but I can easily see them being the third team in the division behind Edmonton and Vancouver. And it's going to be on the shoulders of Quentin Byfield, in my opinion. Like they'll go as far as he goes. If you know what you're going to get out of Kopitar, we know we're going to get probably 30 plus out of Kempe. Fiala is going to be Kevin Fiala. Deneau, we know what Deneau is. Who knows we're going to get 30 out of Moore again, but he looks like he can score. But if Quentin Byfield can take just another step to be an elite player in the NHL, sky's the limit for this team.
Well, Russell, it'll be a little while before I get to talk to you in person out at Crypto.com Arena, but we've got Kings hockey in just a couple of days. Looking forward to it. You never know what the season is going to hold. It's always exciting to see how it turns out, and looking forward to it. He is Russell Morgan from Hockey Royalty. We always appreciate his time, and I'm not kidding when I say if you are on social media, you need to follow him on X or Twitter at NHL Russell. Russell, thanks, and I'm sure we'll talk again at some point, but looking forward to seeing you out there and looking forward to seeing some Kings hockey here in the next couple of days.
Thanks, Eddie. See you soon.
All right. That is Russell Morgan, again, from hockey royalty, and we always very much appreciate his time. For you everydayers, those of you that listen and watch Locked On LA Kings every day, coming up on Wednesday's show, we will preview in depth the Kings season opener in Buffalo against the Sabres. They've played a couple of games already. Didn't go great for them. We'll tell you all about that. Thursday, because it is an early game Pacific time, 4 p.m. Pacific time in the season opener in Buffalo, we will have a post-game recap show that night on Thursday night for you to be able to check out. And of course, on Friday will be our Kings fan feedback show. As always, the email address to get in on that is lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE. And we love your comments on the YouTube episodes as well if you're watching there. Also, stay interactive with the show on social media, X, Twitter, and Instagram. We are at Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you as always for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you tomorrow. And as always, go Kings, go.